It's a great pleasure to have Hannes Wessels back on for his second talk. Long-awaited second talk, Hannes. This is very much by demand, popular demand. So without further ado, brother, it feels weird interviewing you. Let me hand over to you.
Well, John, as I said, I'm surprised there's that much interest in what I've got to say. After talking to a guy like Jerry Strong, it's a reminder of just what great leadership we had. What an outstanding officer, outstanding man. And I just come away from that lamenting the fact that a bloke like him wasn't moved up the ranks faster to a more senior position. With all due respect to some of the generals, I think some of them were quite pedestrian in their generalship, and it's a pity some of the younger guys didn't get up into at a higher level quicker than they did. So it was a real privilege to talk to Jerry again. But back to my not so interesting story. I think when we left it last time, I had got to the commando. I got there late because I'd done this survival course in the Chimani Manis, and I arrived feeling a little bit out of sorts when this Lance Corporal Jan de Beer, I was put in 10th Troop. Nigel Theron was the troop commander, and I wasn't sure where I was going to go, and Jan de Beer approached me and introduced himself, and I took an immediate liking to him. And he had just done a tracking course, and so he was doing the sort of reaction stuff, and I ended up with Jan. And so there I was, looking back on it. I was 18, and we were being called out quite regularly. So I was off to work in a helicopter as an 18-year-old. Not many people have that sort of good fortune, but we did quite extensive follow-ups. A lot of them ended up at the minefield. I remember we ended up around Mukumbura a few times. We weren't allowed to cross without authority, so not an awful lot came of it. Then we did go on an operation into Mozambique, and I think most of the commando was actually deployed south of the Zambezi, and we were deployed to look for camps. Problem for me and some of the other guys, we were all issued Portuguese Army combat boots, and mine were too bloody small for me. And jeepers, we walked. And my feet were killing me. And I think we actually got lost. It was in that flat woodland. Some of the days were overcast. Map reading was extremely difficult. And we walked, and I think we were walking in bloody circles. I don't know, but it was. We were doing some serious miles, and the water was running short. It was a very, very tough deployment, as I remember. We ended up digging for water at one stage. One of the guys walked into buffalo beans. He nearly went berserk trying to deal with the irritation caused by the hairs. It wasn't the terrorist's fault, but we didn't have a very easy time of it. Fortunately, we then connected with a captured terrorist, and he took us to, and we found this big arms cache in a massive baobab. I'll never forget it, and it was packed with rockets and mines and stuff. And when we found that, they had to come and collect us. So we were picked up and taken back to Rhodesia, but it was not a moment too soon. One of the blokes in my stick actually drank the cough mixture out of the bloody medics pack. He was so desperate for liquid, and he went. I think he was going a bit bloody nuts. So it was quite good to get back. I think one of the other sections did find one of the camps. Was I remember a couple of hunters coming in and doing a strike. I was quite a long way away from where they attacked, so I didn't see any of the action there. But yeah, it was quite a long. I think we were there for about 10 days, and it was very, very good to get home.
This is in Zambia?
But, no, Mozambique. south of the Zambezi. I don't think we got to the Zambezi, but all the riverbeds were dry. There'd just been no rain that year, and we just couldn't find any water. So, but map reading there was very, very challenging because there were no features, and some of the days there was no sun. You couldn't see where the sun was, because of the Canada cloud, and so it was quite an interesting experience. But yeah, we all got back safely. And as I said, I was with Nigel Theron. He was our troop commander. And I don't know, we just didn't really hit it off for one reason or another. But I think it wasn't helped by the fact that upon a day, we were doing OP ambushing. And we were sitting there having a cup of tea or something, I don't know. And he got talking to me on quite a level basis. I was very respectful of him, obviously, as a lieutenant. But we started chatting. And he said to me, we're not going to win this war. We can't win it. And I remember thinking, jeepers creepers, this is coming from a lieutenant. I'm just a troopy, but here I am thinking, jeepers, we're gonna win this. We've got all the good guys, and we've got to win. So a little bit naive, but I got into a bit of a discussion, which then turned into a bit of an argument, as I'm wont to do. And I found reasons to disagree with him, put it that way. And I don't think it went down too well. I think he thought I was a bit of a smart aleck, and maybe I am. So we didn't have a great relationship, but I really enjoyed being with Jan de Beer. And then, of course, Ed Fichet, who was the reason I'd gone to 2 Commander, because he actually was the guy who said, don't go to the SAS. I'm going to 2 Commander. Come with me. And I was very flattered by that. But then when I got to the Commander, I didn't see an awful lot of him. But then my first actual contact where we really got stuck in was a call out with Ed Fichet, and he was in charge, but I wasn't actually in his helicopter. It wasn't a great day for me, I've got to say. We got this call out, and we'd been on a few call outs, and it turned out to be a lemon. And so I was thinking, Jesus, is this for real? And nothing was happening. And then just suddenly, I remember flying over a hill feature, and I looked out. I had a machine gun, and I looked out, and there was, I think it was a black Selous scout who was waving something bright, and he was obviously pointing at where the camp was. And with that, the ground fire started, and I remember a couple of rounds going through the perspex, and jeepers, then I realized we're in Indian territory here. And if I remember correctly, there were 4 G cars. I don't remember a K car, actually, but 2 of the G cars went higher, I think because of the ground fire, and 2 went down to deploy. I was in one of those that deployed. So there were 8 of us who were put on the ground. We had to jump. I remember hitting the ground bloody hard with that machine gun, fell all over the bloody place. And then it was just dust and, the rotor blades and chaos. And hell, it was all just happening way too quickly for a simpleton like me. But I thought, geez, get into position. You know where the firing is coming from. Get behind your gun and put down covering fire, as I, had kind of been trained to do. And that's what I did. And I let go, I think, maybe a belt and a half. And then the dust cleared, and I looked to my right, there was nobody there. And I thought, Jesus, now what's happened? Well, I tell you what, old Ed Fichet and those other guys. The other thing I remember, we were told not to bloody shoot from the chopper. Well, the stick commander in my chopper was I think a bloke by the name of Van der Walt, corporal, one of those tough RLI corporals, dark hair, and he had glasses. I didn't have much to do with it, but he was the stick commander. So he was sitting opposite me, And I can just remember him grabbing his weapon and just pumping out of that bloody chopper. And I thought, Jesus, you're not supposed to be doing this. This is pretty serious. And I think the pilot was actually shouting at him to stop, but he was so desperate to get his hands on these guys. He was about to jump out the bloody helicopter. I mean, he was just aggression like you can't believe. So when we hit the ground, I didn't see it or hear it, but he just ran straight into this mob, along with Ed Fouché with his guys. And by the time I got my act together to catch up with them, I'll tell you, most of it was over. There were dead people all over the bloody place, and I kind of came running in there a little bit late. I mean, I did get into a riverbed. I remember at one stage, old Fouché shot him. He said, "Get in there." There was somebody in there, and I put down some fire, and I think he came barreling out, and they got him. So I made a bit of a contribution, but I tell you, at the end of it, I thought, what a prick you are. It was quite a revelation, coming in from training troop and thinking you know what you're doing to actual combat. And I got a first-class lesson in aggression, and that wonderful aggression that characterized the RLI. My word, those were very brave men. I get quite emotional about it. I feel like I was really lucky, and I think we were all lucky to actually be in the company of those kind of guys. They were a very special breed. So that was my first real brush with fire.
Ed Fouché was a BCR recipient.
Yes, yeah, he was.
Did that happen
Wonderful
in your
bloke.
time, or was that before your time?
Yeah, no, before me. In fact, I think he already had his Bronze Cross. I think it was for an yeah, I'm sure he did. It was for an earlier operation and something in Mozambique. They'd gone on some operation into Mozambique where he got a Bronze Cross. But John, he's gone now. What a wonderful guy. What an impression he made on my life. He was a fearsome looking chap. He had this unfortunate birthmark and those brown killer eyes. But there behind it all was this wonderful human being who understood what he was doing, understood where we were coming from. He was really a fabulous guy. I'm happy to say in his twilight years, I was able to help him a little bit. Unfortunately, here's what I would like to have done, John. He was a fabulous guy. And he, like a lot of these wonderful soldiers, he didn't have an easy life after the army. I don't think he ever, like a lot of those blokes, never really found their feet in civilian life and ended up, the last time I saw him, I gave him a hug, but there wasn't much I could do. And I've got to say, death might not have been a bad place for old Ed. He'd done his bit, and it was time to move on. But what a great guy. Yeah, John, what an experience. I think we all had it. It all made a big impact on our lives. Those guys changed us, shaped our lives, made us better people. But it was traumatic. I remember going another contact we had somewhere I think it was in the Chesa purchase area, and this group was actually very close to the village there, and we managed to deal with most of the enemy, but there were women in there with them, and so they got caught up in the crossfire, and I remember sweeping through, and there was this African lady, young, probably 19, 20, lying there. She had a pretty floral dress on, but she had, she'd been shot in the stomach and the abdomen or something. I don't know. I think one of her legs was shot off, and it was not a pretty sight. She was still alive, and I looked at this and thought, war is really a tragic affair. She was obviously killed. She was running with the enemy. So, there's no, that's what happens in war if you in situations like that. But it was still, it's something that sticks in my mind. And, as I say, it was a tragic reminder of the brutality, the reality of war, and something to be avoided if possible. But John, just talking about the NCOs, in Two Commando, I know there were great NCOs throughout the RLI, but my word, I think we were blessed with blokes like John Schatz, Trevor Jordan, Boots Alexander, Ronnie Travers, Trevor Hodgson. They were all corporals, sergeants, and what terrific soldiers and leaders they were. They were outstanding. What a privilege it was to have them to serve under. But that was the RLI, and then I finished. John, very sad looking back. Blokes that I worked with and became very fond of. Jan de Beer, blonde, blue eyes, came up to Rhodesia for a bit of an adventure. Came from Springbok, and he got stuck in, and he was killed in 75, I think, along with John Coey, I think the American. There were 4 of them killed in that when they were trying to get those blokes out of a cave. And I think Jan actually went to try and help somebody who'd already been wounded, and he got hammered. And I think he spoke his last words on the radio. I don't know. I wasn't actually there, but a lovely guy, gone. And Mark Langerman, he was a brilliant sportsman at school. He just had the world at his feet, and he was killed on an op that went wrong in Mozambique. I don't know the details, but Mark didn't make it. Nigel Turon, he went to the SAS, and he also didn't make it. So, just when you look at the casualties in the context of the numbers, we took quite a heavy toll. And I look back at school, the number of my contemporaries, my year, I don't know how many of them got killed, but quite a few. And then my troop, 10 troop, I'm not sure how many of them made it, but took its toll. Ronnie Travers, I think he was killed. I remember them all fondly and with a great sense of sadness, but there were certainly people that enriched my life. And then I finished my time, and I left the army, and I was a little bit undecided about what I wanted. I was actually quite pleased to be out. I suppose we all were in a way, but a little unsure about what I was going to do next. And then suddenly I started thinking, geez, the army, maybe go back and have a go at making a career of it. And my old man was keen for me to go to university, and I had mixed feelings about it. And actually, in the interim, when we came out, my great friend from school, Fred Coates, I don't know if you remember him, Fred Coates. His old man was Frank Coates. Fred was one big China at school. So we'd gone to the army together, but he actually ended up doing a drill course and became an instructor at Llewellyn. But after I came out the army, Fred's mom had won a damn competition. She used to enter all the competitions in the South African magazines, and she'd won a trip for 2 to Durban, and she gave it to Fred. Well, Fred didn't have a girlfriend or anything. So he said to me, do you want to come to Durban for 2 weeks? So I said, Jesus, yeah, I'd love to. So we had I think it was 10 days at the Four Seasons Hotel in Durban. It was the first time I ever got in a jet aeroplane. It was one of those 720s. Remember that they had. And so there, our friend and I were getting this plane and wow, off to Durban. 10 days in Durban. And we had quite a bit of cash, from saved up because we hadn't spent much in the army. Man, we had a good time. And then after that, got back to what was then Salisbury, and my old man was there to pick me up. And I think he was still a bit pissed from bloody 10 days of getting smashed in Durban. And I get in the car, and my old man says, "Well, you're going to university." So I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, you've been accepted. You're in the law faculty, and you're in Smuts." And in those days, it was quite difficult to get into Smuts. It probably still is. I don't know, but it was one of the better residences, and it was the residence he'd been in. So, oh, geez, the die was kind of cast. You're off, and so that was it. I packed my bags, and off I went to Cape Town University. And John, it's hard to imagine a bigger contrast when you think about it. I mean, I come out of the RLI, and now I go to UCT, which was, and I'm in the law faculty, and I'm in the political, because I was doing political science and comparative African government and law. So I was in the political science faculty, and that was just a hotbed of left-wing hardline activists. I mean, white, ideologically, completely on the same side as the enemy that I'd just been up against. So now here I am sitting in a lecture theatre with Jeremy Cronin, who's still around. He's still, I think, in the ANC. He was one of the lecturers. Mary Simons, whose father was, I think, head of the South African Communist Party, and she was a seriously committed communist. And I sat there just bewildered with, thinking to myself, cheapers, I've just been there and now I'm here. And it was quite a difficult transition to make. And I wasn't at all happy with where I found myself. But funny enough, my old man goes to, my old man was mayor of Umtali in days gone by. So all the civic functions they had in Umtali, my mom and dad used to get invited to. And there'd been some mayoral thing in Umtali, and mom and dad were there. And my dad was mates with Ian Smith, not great friends, but they knew each other quite well. So he's chatting to Ian Smith at this do, and he told him, I'm at UCT and I'm bitching because of bloody run by communists and stuff like that. And then I wanted to come home and go to the bloody army and stuff. And he said, and bless him, when you think about it, he said to him, "No, you tell Hannes, he must stay there because we're going to need lawyers. We've got soldiers, but we're going to need lawyers. When we sort this bloody thing out, when the war's over, we're going to need lawyers. So you tell him from me, he bloody stays there and gets his head in those books, and he can come back when he's a lawyer." Shame. He was so positive, old Ian Smith, and it never worked out that way, sadly. But John, just another thing I'm talking about Ian Smith, I just want to mention, at the end of my service, towards the end, it was by November, December that year, the Selous Scout pseudo operators were just knocking hell out of the enemy. It was so effective. They were finding these guys all the time. The fire forces were reacting, and it was just going like Swiss watch, and the enemy was being hammered. And looking back, I think it's a watershed moment, and probably a tragedy in the history of our country. But that's when Forster stepped in with this Détente initiative. And Ian Smith was very reluctant. He was very skeptical about the whole thing right from the get-go. So was P.K. van der Bijl, and I think so was General Walls. But the South Africans, as you know, had us by the balls. And he said, "Stop, ceasefire, because I'm going to I'm going to sort this thing out politically. He, at that time, had become quite friendly with Kenneth Kaunda, and he felt he was building all these bridges into Africa, and there was going to be a political settlement. So while there was resistance from Ian Smith couldn't argue with John Forster. John Forster said, that's the way it's going to be. Otherwise, we shut the border and you're finished. So it was reluctantly that Ian Smith was hauled into that whole détente exercise. But then, there was a ceasefire that went on for about 4 months. And, numbers vary, but some people reckon there was tens, not hundreds, of enemy combatants in the country when détente was declared, when the ceasefire was called. The enemy had been absolutely destroyed at that point in time, and there was no going back. So that ceasefire was really critical for the enemy to actually go and lick their wounds and recoup and rearm and re-strategize. And when the war started again, we were in a very different place. So that was not a good time for us as a country, but completely beyond Ian Smith's control. He had a gun at his head, and he just had to do what Forster wanted him to do. And Forster, history will show, was actually incredibly naive. He didn't really understand what was happening in Africa. He just had this idea that he could basically use Rhodesia as a bargaining chip and buy time for South Africa by we were going to be the sacrificial lambs, I suppose.
So Hannes, how could things have turned out differently?
John, it's a very thought-provoking question, and obviously easy with hindsight to suggest various scenarios. But what not many people know is when the Portuguese, after the coup in Portugal, and the leadership in Mozambique, the military and intelligence guys, along with some of the bigger industrialists, put it that way, or business people in Mozambique, I think one of them was Jorge Jardim, they actually came to see Ian Smith. And they said, look, the will to fight has been lost in Portugal, but what about we draw a line at the Zambezi, and Frelimo, the enemy, take north of the Zambezi, and we consolidate with you in Rhodesia and get the South Africans to buy into it, and we form a salient along the Zambezi and draw the line there. And Ian Smith and P.K. van der Bijl were very enthusiastic about that idea, but they well knew it couldn't work without South African involvement. And but the Zambezi was quite an easy line to defend when you think about it. And already, we had been very active there and knew the territory. I mean, the SAS had been extremely effective already in that area, knew where all the camps were, and the enemy was having a very hard time there as well. So it was a very defensible line, but Forster wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. He was so busy trying to ingratiate himself with the frontline states, and his intelligence guy at the time, Hendrik van der Berg, also very blinkered, couldn't see the bigger picture. The one guy that could, who unfortunately didn't have enough say, was P.W. Botha. He always understood the strategic value of fighting this war outside South Africa's borders, and he would have gone for it, I think. But Forster was just not at all interested, and it's just one of those things that might have changed history. A lot of the Portuguese army was disinterested and would have wanted to go back to Portugal, but there was a hardcore and some, as we know, some excellent soldiers in the Mozambique army who would have stayed and would have formed the nucleus of a potentially very effective army and fighting force.
Was Pik Botha a man of influence in those days?
Huge. huge. And he was very much a Forster man. And funny enough, he had no real soft spot for Rhodesia, and he didn't like Ian Smith, and Ian Smith didn't like him. Ian Smith never liked Pittwater. So we got very little support from there, and it was really Pittwater and Forster who insisted on the firing of PK van der Bijl as defense minister, and that was another sad day for us who wanted to win that war, because he was the last real minister of defense who knew what he was doing, who wanted to fight the war aggressively. PK knew that war couldn't be fought defensively; it had to be an aggressive thing, and he was ready for anything. He didn't mind if the military wanted to go on the offensive, he was right behind them. And so, like, him and Ron Reed Daly got on extremely well, because he was very receptive to an innovative guy like Ron Reed Daly. He wanted to give those guys the initiative. You get on, you come up with the ideas, and I'll do my best to support you politically. And so, there was Forster, who was trying to rein the Rhodesians in, and PK was seen as being way too aggressive. And that didn't suit Forster. And so Forster just told Ian Smith, there's no discussion, you get rid of him. Otherwise, we'll cut you guys off. And I think it was 76 that they did actually, close that border. I remember I was back in the army at the time, and suddenly there was no ammo. The fuel was short. Everything was running dry, and that was direct. The South Africans said that there was a problem with rail carriages or something, but it wasn't. It was a warning order to Salisbury: you behave, otherwise this isn't going to work out nicely for you. We'll just throttle you.
Yeah.
But John,
tell us about your time after the RLI, when you came back as a national serviceman, doing your call-ups and that type of thing.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to get to that. Initially, not much happening, but
by the way, did you finish university and end up as a lawyer?
Yeah. Did. Yeah, I did. Didn't practice for very long, about 6 months.
Okay.
Because that's another story. But I did get my degree. Took a while, but I got it. But a night that sticks in my mind, and I just had to check up the date there. Okay, I think it was the 14th of December, 1976, 14th or 15th. 14th, probably the 14th. So we were based there near Nyanyadzi, and there was a call out. What had happened in the Burma Valley, just south of Umtali, the Burma Valley farmers, they had their own little motorbike reaction stick to react to incidents in the valley. They were actually trying to look after themselves there and doing a pretty good job of it. And one of the farmers, they used to call them boss boys then, not politically correct these days, but his farm manager came to Brian in the morning and said, there's been a crossing. There's some tracks here from Mozambique, and Burma Valley was right on the Mozambique border. And so he went to have a look, and sure enough, there were fresh tracks. And so he sent out the word to the other guys. They jumped on their motorbikes, and I don't know, about 4 of them, and they went off after these guys on their bikes. Up, there's a sort of escarpment coming into the valley, and they went in there on their bikes. And the next thing, these guys had been walking all night, the insurgents, and they were actually resting when these guys barreled into them on their motorbikes, and there was a hell of a punch up there. And they managed to actually kill a couple of these guys, and then the rest ran for it. And we got the call out to go and do the follow-up. And so we flew in there, 8 of us. I can't remember who all the guys. Well, Jerry King was in charge. Poor old Jerry. And yeah, so we got on tracks and we followed, but it went into that, they went into that Zamunya, then tribal trust land, communal land, and very heavily populated. And it was a hotbed of anti-Rhodesian sentiment, put it that way. We weren't very popular there. And these tracks just went in all sorts of different directions. And so we really ran out of ideas. And we were then told, we'll go back into the Burma Valley and go and find a place to ambush on that route in, which was actually, they'd come in on the dirt road from across from where Chikamba Dam is. There used to be a border post there. They'd walk straight up there. So we told them, "Now get back there and go and ambush." And now it's a long walk back there, so about 10 k's. We get back there, and it's nighttime, and to roughly where we're supposed to ambush, looking for a spot, and we can hear music. So go a bit closer, and while we're there, the farmers are having a bloody piss up, celebrating their day's action out there. And it's just on the side of the road. Well, I knew all the Burma Valley farmers because my cousins all were down there. My aunt and uncle and farm down there. So I used to spend a lot of time there. I knew most of those guys. So I said to Jerry, who was the sergeant, I said, "Well, so let's just go and say hello to these guys." So we wander in there, and they are flying. These buggers are pissed. And we walk into this, and it's, "Oh, Jesus, good to see you, buddy," whatever. Meantime, we've left Jerry. It was Jerry, me, and I think one of the other guys. We've left the other 5 blokes on the road there, where we're supposed to be ambushing. Now we're in with these guys, and fuck, have a drink, lady. This, well, too much for me. So we start having a couple of quick beers. Well, one leads to another. And then, you sort of get in the mood. And Jerry was very much in the mood. And they were all saying, "What's the point of bloody ambushing? They came through last night. They're not going to come through again tonight, Yeah, just come and sleep in the bloody, get the other guys, come have a beer, sleep in the barn, whatever. Let's have a good time." Well, it actually was sounding quite appealing. But I fortunately had the good sense to say to Jerry, I said, "Jerry, we better get out of here and go and do what we've been told to do." So we sort of dragged our feet out of there, and off we went down. Now the other guys that we've left on the road, they are pissed off because they've been sitting there, and we're getting bloody pissed here with the farmers. So there was a bit of a bloody to do. Anyway, lots of grumbling. We now set off into the night and now it's very difficult to find a really decent place to ambush, but we just thought we've got to do it. So we found a spot, and actually not far from where these guys were, but there was some quite thick cover from view. There was just some thick, bushy cover there. So we crawled in there, and it was Jerry and then me and then the other 6 guys down here, and we get into position. You can still actually hear the music. These guys are still going. And so we lie there thinking, "Russ, just go through the motions. I mean, there's no ways anybody's going to be coming through here now, surely." Well, I don't know how long we'd been there for, but I know Jerry had gone. He was fast asleep. And I was lying there. I had a machine gun. I was lying there, and I thought, Jesus, I heard this bloody scuffing. Somebody with boots or something that wasn't lifting their feet, and I could hear the scuffing on the gravel as they walked, and then the steps got closer and closer, and I thought, Jesus, there's somebody coming down this bloody road. It shouldn't be here. I said to Jerry, I woke him up. I said, "Jerry, there's bloody people coming down here," and he said, "Jesus, man, they must be curfew breakers. just leave them, and possibly it could be, but we had to shoot, curfew breakers were not supposed to, nobody was supposed to be moving on the roads. Well, the next thing, I just saw these silhouettes in front of me, and I thought, no, that's it. And I opened up, and thank God I did, because it was an enemy, group of enemy, and fortunately, one of the guys, or from Rensburg or Cackle, I think, well trained. I didn't even realize it, but he put out his claymore, and he let that claymore go. And Jesus, did I get that bloody thing at close range? But he let it go, and so we managed to kill some of these guys, including the paymaster, who had a whole lot of bloody. He had quite a lot of cash on him. But in the morning sweeping, we found a capture, and that's what really. This is what leads on to what I want to say. He was still alive. He'd been shot in the stomach. He was in quite a bad way. I remember I gave him some painkiller or anything, but SB came when we said a capture. SB came straight in with a chopper, picked him up, and he gave them the information on this camp that they'd come from in Mozambique. It was called Rambanai. And it was on the basis of that capture that that operation was then quickly put together, and that attack then went in. And where, I think about it so often, how fate has its way. But I had just met Bruce Burrell about 2 weeks prior to that in Salisbury, and he had just passed the SAS selection as a national service officer, and the SAS were a little bit disturbed by this, put it that way, because I don't think they had any national service officers at that time. So when he came on selection, they gave him a particularly hard time, because they weren't sure that they wanted him in. So it'd be easier if he just failed and the problem goes away. But they couldn't break old Bruce, and so he came through the selection. So he passed, but he didn't have his colors yet. He still had to go operational before he would, be badged and get his belt. And it was in that process that this target appeared as a result of that ambush. And so in he goes, and this is really where he's got to earn his, earn his colors. As long as he performs here, he would have got his belt and beret. And I'm also, I think I'm right when I say, the day of that attack, he was supposed to be at an interview for his Rhodes Scholarship. He was an incredibly talented guy, a fantastic sportsman, very bright, just your epitome of what a Rhodes Scholar should be. Unfortunately, they're not like that anymore, but in those days, that's what they looked for in Rhodes Scholars. And he and I think it was Brian Robinson had said to his parents, that's fine, he can do that unless something happens, in which case he's got to, the military will come first. And it did come first, and Bruce went off, and that's where he was killed. So absolutely tragic. What a fine individual. And that's and unfortunately that day, Butch Alexander, who I'd also got very fond of, that's the day he was killed. So it's just the twisted hand of fate, John. But I do think about it a lot. Nothing you can do about it now, but it's certainly something that troubles me to this day. What was it all about?